Hello, and welcome to Exploring Journalism's Future, a podcast powered by the Institute for Media and Public Trust at Fresno State. I'm Professor Betsy Hays, faculty in the Department of Media, Communications, and Journalism here at the university. From analyzing existing models to discovering innovative ones, from crafting content strategies to optimizing distribution, and everything in between, we are going to connect you with a diverse array of experts and advocates dedicated to revitalizing and fortifying one of the world's most vital industries. Today, in this first inaugural episode, we are so happy to have with us Jim Boren, the Executive Director of the Fresno State Institute for Media and Public Trust and retired Executive Editor of the Fresno Bee. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Betsy.
So let's get right into it. You developed the idea for this fabulous podcast, Exploring Journalism's Future. Why? Why did you create this idea?
Well, I wanted to have an opportunity to bring together leading thinkers in the future of journalism who can offer their insights and ideas to benefit both the news industry and the communities we serve. So in the coming weeks, you'll hear from frontline journalists, philanthropic funders who support newsroom initiatives, and other key voices who are dedicated to sustaining the mission of quality journalism, which is the thing that we're always aiming for.
And what do you hope the podcast does? What do you want to happen when folks do listen to all these fabulous experts?
So we want to make this a community conversation, and that people look at this, listen to and watch this podcast and come up with their own ideas and try to come together, kind of crowdsource the best journalism ideas moving forward to solve some of the really tough problems that we face on the business model of funding journalism.
Wonderful. Oh, and we just can't wait to get started. So back to the Institute, which is another one of your fabulous brainchilds. And so in the spring of 2018, the Institute was born. Talk us through that a little bit. What gave you the idea, and why did you think building the Institute was important?
It's an idea that I had when I was still at the Fresno Bee, and then when I came over to the MCJ department at Fresno State, it gave me an opportunity to flesh out this idea, and with the support of you when you were chair and the dean of the College of Arts and Humanities and others, we decided that this is a good idea. So we wanted to focus on a big issue at the time, that trust issue between news consumers and journalists, media literacy issues, and also develop a pipeline for diverse journalists in our community. So that's some of the issues that we wanted to do. We very quickly got financial support from people that thought it was a good idea. So we were out there, and I'm just so thrilled at how far we've come in the last 6 years.
I love it. So what is the Institute? If you were to describe its mission, what it does to our fabulous listeners and viewers, what would you say?
Well, we try to put together programs that enhance the quality of journalism, training programs for student journalists and professional journalists. We have discussion groups that talk about some of the challenging problems in journalism. And we try to highlight some of the successes of journalism in the San Joaquin Valley.
Fantastic. So one of those programs, and we'll talk about obviously several things that you do, but the Journalists of Color program, I know, is something that's near and dear to your heart. So talk to us about that.
Well, it was an idea that I also had when I was at the Fresno Bee. I wanted to get more diverse journalists into our newsroom, and there was not a lot of trained journalists in our community from diverse backgrounds. And so I thought, well, maybe the answer is we grow our own. So we start a program. We go into the high schools and ask students if they'd like to take journalism training. And so we started with the idea that we would pay them $300 a month for 9 months during the academic year, train them in journalism. We're about to start our fourth cohort in October, and we're really pleased with that. They can stay in the program up to 5 years, senior year of high school, and then 4 years of college. And when they come out and get to be trained journalists, we will find them jobs in San Joaquin Valley newsrooms.
Ah, that's fantastic. And so far, the feedback from the students who have participated in the program has been extremely positive, correct?
Yeah, it's been really good. A couple of our top students are our top students in the MCJ department, Gloria Flores and Jasmine Alvarado. And Jasmine is now the news editor of the Collegian, the student-run newspaper at Fresno State. So we're on our way, and I think that these young people are going to tell the stories of their communities, and we're going to have a much better tapestry of journalism in the San Joaquin Valley.
So speaking of homegrown talent, another program that the Institute is just about to launch is a healthcare reporter project that includes not only a professional, but also a partnership with a student journalist. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, this is a really exciting partnership between the Institute for Media and Public Trust at Fresno State and the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative. We're going to fund a full-time healthcare reporter who will focus only on healthcare issues in the San Joaquin Valley. In addition, one of our MCJ students will be a student assistant to learn healthcare journalism and maybe be a data resource and a research assistant for that. So they'll learn that. And we believe that this is going to enhance the coverage of healthcare in the San Joaquin Valley.
And because this person's going to be part of the journalism collaborative, that means that the content and the stories they write are accessible to multiple organizations. Is that correct?
Yes. And that's a requirement, although the collaborative was more than willing to do that because they do that. But we want this funding for this journalist to allow all the stories that the journalist writes and the podcasts and the radio and video that they create under the fellowship to be accessible to any San Joaquin Valley journalism outlet. And so it's not just going to be news stories, but we're going to have podcasts, radio, and video. So we're going to use all the multimedia opportunities to enhance the healthcare coverage in the Valley.
Great. And then obviously increase the audience, right? That gets to see and
sure.
read and listen to all of this great content. Wow. That's so exciting. So something else the Institute is involved in is programming for all. I know you've had both in-person and virtual programs with speakers and panels, educating folks on all kinds of journalism-related topics, many of those over the years. If you could maybe share a couple of examples so folks could understand that type of programming.
Yeah, we brought in Ken Kachigian, who was a Reagan and Nixon speechwriter, to talk about the Reagan and Nixon White Houses. And he was an insider. He's also from Visalia. So we had a personal connection to Mr. Kachigian. It turned out to be a really good event. We're planning an election misinformation, disinformation panel discussion on campus soon. And that will help the public understand what's going on with the presidential election and all the challenges we have around misinformation and AI and other kinds of things. So those are some of the programs we've done. We recently did a training program for student and professional journalists on how to be safe in covering events and protests and all the things that are going on, because often journalists are under threat. And so that's one of the issues that we wanted to look into very closely. So we're looking for ways to improve the toolkit of local journalists.
I love that. Love that. So multifaceted programming and lots of different ways that the Institute is helping facilitate media and public trust, and also, strengthening the pipeline of the journalists of the future.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
So why did you choose a career in journalism?
I started out at Hoover High School, right down the road from Fresno State, working on the student newspaper. And I continued that at Fresno City College and then at Fresno State, and had an opportunity to work part-time at the Fresno Bee while I was a student. And so the opportunities just took off. Every time I thought that a door had closed, another one had opened, and it was just incredible thing to think that someone, a local kid, ended up being the executive editor of his hometown newspaper. I mean, it was sort of the greatest opportunity that I've ever had. And then, of course, after retiring in 2018 and having, the second act to be able to teach journalism at Fresno State has just been very fulfilling. So I feel very blessed by that opportunity.
So, in addition to the executive director of the Media Institute hat, you're also on several boards that support journalism. If you could share that information.
Yes, I'm on the Journalism Funding Partners Board. It's a national organization that raises money for local journalism around the country. In the last year, for example, we've raised about $6 million for newsrooms from California to North Carolina, and down to Florida. So we're really appreciative of being able to do that. I'm also on the California Press Foundation Board, which has a focus of helping to create a pipeline of journalists into California newsrooms. So it's been very exciting to work with those boards.
And let's talk about, EdSource. That was the one I wanted to ask you about as
Okay.
well, because that is kind of a specialized, a more specialized board, but also does some really, really great work.
Yeah, I just joined the board of EdSource in June, and that board is many of you may know, but for those who don't, it's a newsroom that covers education, the education community exclusively. So they really drill down into education coverage, and and the more I get involved with EdSource, the more I'm impressed by the work that they do. So it's one of those news sites that has a specific purpose, which is education coverage.
So on that note, the Institute is starting the healthcare journalism fellowship program, and then we have, which will be very specific toward the idea of healthcare. And then you've also got EdSource, which is, very specific toward the beat of education. Do you think that these more narrow slices, exclusive narrow slices, being funded by different folks is potentially part of the future of journalism?
And it's an open question, but I really believe that when we get funders who are willing to give money to pay for journalists to cover important issues such as healthcare in the San Joaquin Valley, such as California education issues, I think that's good. I think it's good for journalism, and it's also good for readers and viewers out, in California and across the country. So yeah, I think that it's part of that future. It's philanthropy driven, which is one of the big issues now, to try to work on the business model of journalism, as we've lost advertising over the years to big tech and other places. You need to find a way to pay for journalists that cover our communities.
Absolutely. So, on that note, what are your hopes for the future of journalism?
Well, I think we need to change the narrative about journalism. Instead of talking about layoffs and limitations, I hope we strive for innovation and reinvention of journalism's, possibilities. We need to find a business model that works for all newsrooms, whether it's philanthropy or making big tech pay for the news it is siphoning off from news sites and the advertising dollars. So we need to collaborate on ways to cover our communities and promote democracy by having a thoughtful community conversation through the newsrooms and the stories that they produce. I don't know what the ultimate answer is. I think philanthropy is part of it. I think there's opportunities for government funding, and there's other ideas out there. And we're going to need to figure this out, because if we end up with news sites with few resources, then politicians and big corporations are going to be telling the narrative of their stories, and that is not always going to be the true story. And it'll hurt democracy in the long run, because we need a community conversation. We need a newsroom that can tell stories about Fresno City Hall and the Fresno School Board and the Clovis School Board, and let people know what's going on, and not just from PR point of view, but the real facts. And so I think that the future of journalism has to be committed to covering all the issues that are important to readers and viewers and listeners.
So coupled or parallel to that is, the idea of the future of local journalism. So what are some of your thoughts and hopes for local journalism specifically?
Well, local journalism is crucial for you at renewing trust and engagement. Local journalists cover stories that directly affect people's lives. So we need to restore strong local news networks that will reinvigorate journalism's role in our democracy. I think that's so crucial, because what happens in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento is of course very important, but school boards impact daily lives. They tell when we get up in the morning, when we can go on vacation. They teach our children. They provide opportunities for sports and arts and community organizations. So that the local story is really very important, and we need to keep telling that story. I think it's really important to have this focus on local journalism. It's one of the reasons that Journalism Funding Partner, which I'm on that board, raises money across the country, but it's focused specifically on local newsrooms. We give money to hire local reporters in local communities that tell the stories of those communities.
Yeah. Because if they're not going to tell the stories are not going to be told.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for listeners and viewers, a little preview, we actually will be talking to folks in the from Journalism Funding Partners later in a later episode of this podcast. So
Right.
if that idea was intriguing to you, we will be digging into that particular organization in more depth. And I know you'll really be looking forward to that.
For sure.
Okay, so your crystal ball, you're looking in it. What do you see for the future of journalism? What do we need to have happen?
Well, I always believe in the glass being half full, and I think it is right now. I think philanthropy is filling a need right now, but I don't think that's the complete story. We need to find a better way to fund journalism, and if we can force big tech to pay for the news content that it is actually siphoning off from newsrooms, so that they can actually have some of those advertising dollars, that would be good. I know that there's been laws proposed in California, and they struck a deal that is probably not very good for journalism, but it keeps the conversation going forward. But we must find a business model that works, so we can hire outstanding journalists to tell the stories in our communities. And then listeners of this podcast, you have a responsibility to pay for the content that you use. You need to be part of that solution. You need to give your dollars and pay for that content. I know that by just looking at the numbers, there's millions of page views of content in the San Joaquin Valley and newsrooms. And so I hope people will be willing to pay for that content through a subscription model, through donations, or some other way. But the bottom line is, journalism is not free, and you need to, if you want quality journalism, you have to pay for it.
Yeah. So anything else before we wrap up this first episode of this brand new podcast, Exploring Journalism's Future?
Well, I just want to reiterate that some of the the speakers in this podcast that come after me are going to be experts, and I think that people are really going to be enthused by the kinds of comments and kind of the stories they tell about journalism in all ways. And so I encourage people to stay with our podcast. And I hope that you'll support, local journalism. I hope you'll support the Institute for Media and Public Trust. And I really believe that the future of journalism is bright. We just got to figure out that business model, but I think we can do that because we got a lot of smart people working on that problem.
Yes, we do. And all of you will get to meet many of those folks, in addition, of course, to our fearless leader, Jim Boren. Thank you, Jim, for spending time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, Betsy. I'm just so thrilled that we've launched this podcast, and thank you for your participation in it. So this is going to be a great service to the community, I believe.
I agree. And thank you all for joining us today. You're invited to tune in next time for another episode of Exploring Journalism's Future, a podcast powered by the Institute for Media and Public Trust at Fresno State. Until then, please keep the faith, and for the love of democracy, please join us in this crucial conversation. Take care.